Hey queer friends, are you ready to be inspired? Welcome to Season 5 of Coming Out and Beyond, a podcast that shares stories from the LGBTQIA+ community. Here's your host, Anne-Marie Zanzal.
Hi, this is Anne-Marie Zanzal, and welcome back to another episode of Coming Out and Beyond, LGBTQIA+ stories. I am beyond excited today to welcome Brian McNaught to the show. He is named the Godfather of Gay Diversity Training by the New York Times, and he is considered one of the world's leading corporate diversity consultants dealing with lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer issues in the workplace. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Anne-Marie, and thank you for inviting me.
I'm so excited to have you.
You and I were chit-chatting before we started recording, and we both come from Irish Catholic backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
My grandmother was a Brannigan, and McNaught was probably originally Scottish, but came through Ireland. I was one of 7. My husband, Ray, with whom I've been 48 years this year, he's one of 7 Irish Catholic. I went to Catholic school for 16 years, but in terms of my story, my faith was really important to me. When I graduated, I graduated from college in 1970, and that was the the first year of the draft.
Oh, absolutely. And my brother was number 29, so he joined the reserves.
Yeah, I was in that group too, but I filed as a conscientious objector based upon my faith. Yeah, well, it was a hard thing to do. People think, oh, you just file and they give it to you. No, you have to write a treatise. You have to, and then you have to stand before 5 angry men who want to know, prove it. And so, but I did. And so I was hired by a Catholic newspaper to be a reporter and a columnist, which satisfied, according to the armed forces, it satisfied their selective service requirement. So here I go from 16 years of Catholic education to 4 years on the newspaper, and meanwhile, I got the courage to go into my first gay bar, and I walked in and Neil Diamond was singing "I Am," I said, and I thought, oh my God, that's, I am. God was asked, who are you? I am. And so here I walk into the bar and I'm hearing "I am," I said, and I thought, this is my new home. I was scared to death. Every gay person I've ever talked to, scared to death the first time they went into a gay lesbian bar. Didn't want to look anywhere. I went at 8 o'clock and there was nobody there. It was Valentine's Day, so I had the bartender. I bought a drink for everyone. I was thinking, this is our little community. There are 9 of us. Well, obviously by 11 o'clock, people are pouring out the door. But I met an Episcopal priest there, and we quickly sort of set up a relationship, but he was emotionally abusive. And so after 4 years of hiding from the newspaper staff and from all of my readers, because I had a lot of followers, hiding who I was.
Brian, what did you write on for the Catholic newspaper? Like,
what did I write on?
Yeah, what was your beat?
Well, see, I did any story they asked me to do, but my column was aimed at people my age, your brother's age, about how faith and social action come together. And I was involved in every civil rights struggle of the day, right? Black rights, Gray Panthers. I mean, it was every day there was a new thing, that you got involved in. And I was involved in all of it. But as Malcolm Boyd said, who wrote "Are You Running With Me, Jesus?" which was a very powerful book for me to read in college.
I have read that.
Did you? Well, you remember the chapter, Anne-Marie, remember the chapter, "Jesus, I'm in a gay bar." And I thought I'd never seen the word gay before. And I read it in college. And I thought, oh my God, this priest has said this word. But so when I was 26, and this is a story, just a little background. for 50 years, 50, this is my 50th anniversary. For 50 years, I've been telling my story. For 50 years, I've been putting a face on the issue because education is the only way you change other people's thinking and behavior. And I've had multiple experiences of sitting next to a fundamentalist Christian on an airplane and have them at the end of the ride say, God had you sit next to me. I never would have known, I didn't know any of this.
Right.
So for 50 years, I've been putting a face on the issue. And part of my story is that at age 26, I drank a bottle of turpentine because I was trapped in this relationship with this Episcopal priest. I was terrified of coming out. I had, like yourself, this reputation of being a superstar, in the family, school, in society at large. People asked me to come and speak at high school communion breakfasts. I was sort of the go-to young guy.
The
I was
example,
supposed,
right? You were the example.
Poster child for being Catholic. Well, then I came out, after I drank the turpentine, I ended up coming out, and they dropped my column at the Catholic newspaper, and then they ended up firing me. But as soon as I was fired, I had these gay newspapers write me and say, well, would you write, a column for our paper?
Wow.
And so before you knew it, I had 10 newspapers that ran my column. And my column was, by an Irish Catholic gay guy. In fact, my first book of 15 was called A Disturbed Peace, Selected Writings of an Irish Catholic Homosexual. And when we lost in Dade County to Anita Bryant, right, I wrote, Dear Anita, late night thoughts of an Irish Catholic homosexual. So, my gig for 50 years has been, look, I grew up Irish and Catholic, and I'm also gay. How did I bring the two together? How did I bring my family along, right? And people would say, and so I was brought to by the, I did 11 years speaking to colleges. Then the corporations brought me in. I was the first person ever trained on diversity issues, on gay issues in a corporation. And when the banks got a hold of me, they brought me to Mumbai and Tokyo, Singapore, Hong Kong, Melbourne, Sydney. I spoke all over the world. The same thing I was doing on college campuses was putting a face on the issue because none of these people knew a gay person. And so here's Brian McNaught. And by the end of my 2-hour talk or 1-hour talk, people would come up to me and say, I think my brother might be, in the beginning, they wouldn't say gay. I think my brother might be, or I think my nephew might be. And, I took people where they were, and I'd either recommend a book of mine. My book on being gay was, it sold like 50,000 copies. It was the go-to book for people your brother's age who were gay. And people still come up to me. I went to a concert by an 85-year-old gay man on Sunday, and people came up to me afterwards because I was introduced mid-concert, and they said, you saved my life. Your book saved my life. And it was why I saved their life. And then I'll shut up and we'll talk. Question. Why I saved their life was because, like you and me, they were people of faith who didn't know that you could be gay and have faith. Can you be gay and still have a family? Can you be gay and still have values? Because they thought that once you said you were gay, you weren't human anymore. You were this horrible thing because I came out in 1974, right? And that was just 5 years after Stonewall. And
it's also the DSM just had let it being gay wasn't a mental disorder anymore.
That's exactly right.
Out in 1974. So you were really born for the right time, right?
Oh, Anne Marie, I was the right guy at the right time in the right place. And the reason I was so successful was because I came from this good family, and I was upper middle class, well educated, articulate, funny, attractive at the time. And
So
so
attractive.
I was the right messenger.
Mhm.
And, and you get this because you grew up Catholic. When I was little and in church, I would get this tingle up and down my spine because I felt safe here
Mhm.
and I felt loved here. And God has been my traveling companion for my whole life. And I said to God when I was little, use me, use me. I wanted to be one of those people. There's a great story, and I have it in my memoir that's coming out this year. The priest quizzing the first graders, who can tell me what a saint is?
Mhm.
And this little boy said, a saint's that thing in the church that the light shines through. Well, obviously he was talking about stained glass windows, but I thought, wow, what a great definition. When I was on stage, it wasn't me, I cleaned the window so that the light could shine through. I didn't let my ego get in the way, but boy, God shone through me. And people will say to me, I just wrote you may have seen it on Facebook. I wrote about how fundamentalist Christians today are saying that the Sermon on the Mount is too liberal and they don't want to abide by it, but they're good Christians. Oh my God,
I know.
Jesus laid it all out in the Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes.
Yeah.
And people are saying, quizzing me, well, how do you know there's a God? How do you know you have a soul? And are you still Catholic? And I've gotten these questions my whole life. But I've said, God, thank you. I thank God all the time, Anne-Marie, for using me as her instrument. I spoke, real quick story, and that's I was the first gay person ever invited to speak to the National Security Agency, the NSA. Those are the people who at this moment are listening to this conversation.
Right.
They have satellites, they listen to everybody. So I was the first gay person. And by that time, Anne-Marie, I was kind of full of myself because I had been, in all these corporations. So I said to them, okay, I'll come, but you have to mandate it. And they said, what do you mean? How are you as a gay person telling us what to do? Well, I said, okay, so I'm not coming unless you mandate it, because no one will come except those who are gay or are the parents of gay people.
Right.
I'll have no one in the audience. And they say, well, we don't mandate things. I say, okay, then send a message out from the director saying, I'm going to be there and I'll be very disappointed if I don't see you. Wow. So it was packed. And there were people from the CIA and the FBI in the audience, right? And I was there to talk about gay issues in the workplace. Gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender issues in the workplace. And so as I walked up the stairs to the stage, it was my ego that allowed me to do it. Our ego is our friend if it doesn't, run wild. My ego allowed me to go up the steps. But once I got on the stage, it was God. I said, you've got an hour, use it, And so you're going to like this. And then I promise to be quiet. I need to tell you.
It might be hard, Brian.
No, it's terrible. You can ask me one question and I talk
boom, you're gone.
2 hours, I'm gone. But you'll love this story.
Chances are, if you're listening to this podcast, you might have developed attraction for other women, or you may be thinking that you possibly may not be straight.
And, sometimes women find themselves falling in love with other women very unexpectedly. So what do you do if you always thought you were straight, but you can't get a woman out of your head and thinking that you might want to be more than just friends?
That's why we have an amazing workshop coming up called Beyond the Closet Door.
That's right. The workshop takes place June 11th to the 13th at 7 p.m. Central Time. So who is this free workshop for?
It's for any women. If you are cis, trans, non-binary, comfortable in women's spaces, who are rethinking their sexual identity and wondering, as I said before, if they aren't quite as straight as they thought they were.
Okay, so is this workshop for women of all ages?
Yes. Actually, later in life is self-defined. The youngest people we've had in our program have been in their mid-20s, while the oldest have been 75 plus.
Well, that sounds great. So how does someone sign up for the free workshop?
Go to the link at comingoutssupport.net and you'll find it on our podcast show notes too.
So that's Beyond the Closet Door, a free online workshop, and you can sign up at comingoutssupport.net.
Yeah, see you there.
And they're all in the book. So one of the things I would say to the people in the audience is, what's the first thing you say when a lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender person comes out to you? What's the first thing you say? And of course, the audience is silent.
I have no problem with that.
Yeah, people, I say to them, the first thing you say is thank you, because of all the people in the room, you've picked me out to tell this to. So say thank you. Don't say I never would have known, or what a waste, or are you sure? Say thank you. And I want you to go home tonight, if you would, and I want all of you to sit at the table with your family, and I want you to ask them, what did you do today? And then when it's your turn, I want you to say, well, I went to a presentation on lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender issues. Don't say LGBT because people think it's a sandwich. Say the words. You know, Anne-Marie, we let straight people off the hook when we say LGBTQ because they don't have to say the word gay then. You know, when I came out to my mom and dad, I said I was gay. I didn't say I was LGBTQ, right? And, you know, it took a lot of courage to use the word gay.
Well, the thing is, I like using LGBTQ because a lot of times, especially with people that are of a different generation that these days, they sort of try on every letter of the alphabet before they decide on who they are. And so the women I work with, most often, you know, a lot of them identify as bisexual, but then they realize they're not bisexual, that they're lesbian. And some of them go on to be pansexual, or some of them also go on to begin to explore their gender as well. So that's why I use LGBTQ, because it's more inclusive
I do that
for the people that I work with.
Yeah, Anne-Marie, I'll say to an audience, LGBTQIA, you know,
Plus,
I add all the initials, but before I do that, I use the words because they need to hear the words and I want them to use the word. So this guy wrote me the next day. He was one of the head people at the NSA, and he said, "You changed my life." He said, "I went home and I did what you told me to do." He said, "I talked to my family and I said, I went to a presentation on lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender issues. 2 hours later, my teenage daughter walked into the bedroom and said, 'Dad, we need to talk. I'm a lesbian.'" And he said, "Brian, I did what you said to do." I said, "Thank you, honey, for telling me." And she burst into tears and I burst into tears and we hugged. And he said, "It never would have happened if I had not said the word lesbian at the dinner table," right? So allies put a face on the issue too, right?
Absolutely. So I've got a bunch of questions for you.
Go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you still identify as being Catholic today?
That's a great question. And I've gone through many stages of
absolutely.
yes, no, you've got to be kidding, never, maybe, yes. You know, and that yes to Catholic also includes yes to Buddhism, yes to Taoism, yes to Judeo or Christian tradition, but no one can tell me I'm not a Catholic, right?
Right.
People can't, you and I are the ones who decide whether we're Catholic. And if we say we're Catholic, then we're Catholic. And people will say,
with a capital C or a small c?
Capital C, damn it. I earned the capital C, right?
You did earn the capital.
I did earn it. This woman came up to me in the early days of the corporate training. You know, this woman came up to me afterwards and said, "I don't like you identifying yourself as Irish Catholic. I'm Irish Catholic, and I don't want you to say you are." And I said, "Well, what do you want me to call myself? Jewish? I'm not. You know, I grew up Irish Catholic. Are you going to tell me I can't say I'm Irish? Right? You know, I'm Irish Catholic, and you've got to get used to it, right? I don't, and I never talk that way. I say I'm Irish Catholic, and I hope, you know, one day you can get your arms around it." So, you know, I just read, and this may astound you, that only 31% of Catholics believe that the host is actually the body of Christ. 69 think it's a symbol.
Right.
Catholics, and you are required to believe that that host is the body of Christ. That's you're required to. So 69% either aren't Catholic or they are, and they choose to believe what they choose to believe, right?
Well, American Catholics are known as being cafeteria Catholics. We take what we like and we put back what we don't.
Okay.
And yeah, and I don't identify as being Catholic anymore. My Catholic faith I was Catholic actually till I was 37. I raised my
Yeah.
first three children were baptized in the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
And actually baptizing my fourth child in a different denomination was incredibly stressful for me because I was taught from the time I was a little girl at church and at home that the Catholic Church was the one true faith.
Right.
And if I left that church, like it really surprised me actually. Like it really surprised me like how challenging it was. I wasn't happy with the Catholic Church for a very long time. And
Yeah.
I was like a very pretty faith. I mean, I joined mommy's groups. My kids went to church. We went to church almost every single week. And I had a moment though, this is like a mama bear moment. So we go to church every week, and my oldest daughter, who is your typical oldest daughter, straight A student, like overachiever kind of kid, she was going up to communion and I was behind her and she had her hands out, how we have them right over left.
Right.
And the priest yelled at her for holding her hands wrong. And that was
holding her hands wrong?
Yeah.
Oh, good grief.
I know. And then my poor little 8-year-old's going back to the pew going, like putting her hands back and forth over trying to figure out what she did wrong. And I leaned down to her and I said, he's an asshole.
Yes.
And so that validated her experience. Like we're not going to listen to him. And that on my journey of leaving Catholicism and then going to evangelical and then going to UCC. So I'm United Church of Christ minister. Right?
Okay. And you know the name Bill Johnson? He's a friend of mine. Bill, UCC, is the first openly gay person ever to be ordained in any Christian denomination. And he's, huh?
Oh, okay.
Where is he? He did it in 1974, believe it or not. And he and I became buddies because in the beginning of the movement, Anne-Marie, there weren't many openly gay people. And so we knew each other. I mean, I know Troy Perry, he's a friend. When I was on my hunger fast, he sent me a note of support, right? So Bill Johnson, yes, UCC is a great denomination, but you're going to find assholes in UCC too.
Well,
right?
And also too, it is, but when I came out, I came out 3 weeks after I was ordained. I was ordained at 50 years old. I went to seminary. I went to Yale Divinity School when I was 42.
Good for you.
And then I became a chaplain. I always wanted to be a chaplain. I never wanted to be a pastor. I have pastored churches, not my thing. I like to be on the margins, and I've always been on. So like doing what I do now, I'm still on the margins, right? But that's always who I've been. And so I did an internship, I did a residency, I did everything and became a chaplain. But like my coming out, honestly, was related to my ordination because I was ordained and then 3 weeks later, I began the process to come out. So there's two sides of me. There's the very intellectual side that says, you had been working on a goal for 10 years, you had achieved this goal. And so, of course, now the thing that you had suppressed for a long time comes flying back, right? So that's the intellectual side of me. But the spiritual side of me said that, my friends who were ministers said, when you're ordained, something's going to happen to you that you don't expect. And so my spiritual side tells me that when I was ordained, God ordained my whole self. which was including my queer self. And then I couldn't suppress it anymore. And that became the untangling of my life. It was a very huge Pandora's box. But I tell you this because I was angry. I was so angry when, I got ordained and then I came out, and I really lost like any connection to God for a couple of years. My wife has been out since 1985. Her cousin Mark, who's our dear, dear friend, he's been out since then. He sings in his Methodist choir in West Hollywood. And he and both Tanda and him talked to me about how when they first came out, they really lost their faith. They became agnostic for a while, and then they actually returned to it. So since coming out for me, I have sort of I don't want to pastor anymore. I don't, but I do. That's the work I do right now.
Uh-huh.
But what I'm asking you is, when you came out, did you lose your faith for a while? Did you?
Actually not.
No.
Actually, Anne-Marie, when I came out, I was made fun of by a lot of gay people because I identified as gay and Catholic. And when I was made the mayor's liaison to the gay community in Boston, the people from the Fag Rag Collective put posters on all the trees in the Boston Common saying, Brian McNaught, the mayor's liaison, invites you to a public orgy, bring boys and toys, slings and things, co-sponsored by Dignity and Integrity. So I didn't know where I belonged when I came out, because in the gay community, there were people who just, couldn't tolerate it. The religion part, they hated.
I find that if I, when I'm on TikTok or something and I talk, I always have people comment something like, but they don't even listen to what I'm saying.
Right.
But the thing is they often reject me, which is, that's fine, but they reject me because they hear that I'm a minister, that I am ordained as a minister.
Yeah.
Oh shit, but I am actually, but it's really interesting. I find that there's segments of the queer community that automatically reject because they have been so hurt by faith and religion. And then there's people that are slightly curious and how did you do this? How did you integrate your queerness with who you are as a person of faith or person of spirituality? Because I consider myself much more spiritual. I'm like you. I'm a Buddhist. I'm a yogi. I'm also a UCC minister. I'm a Catholic. I mean, I'm all those things.
Right. You're supposed to be.
I'm also a lesbian.
Right. And you know what? Being a lesbian is what gives your faith its perspective that it wouldn't have if you weren't a lesbian. See, this is what I say now to gay people, because they say, well, Brian, we got everything we wanted. We wanted to have, a non-discrimination policy and this and that. They said, what do we do now? And I said, okay, here's the question. What do you bring to the table? Because you're lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, what gifts do you bring to the table because of that? Well, I can spend an hour telling you about the gifts of gay men, which we have not because of suffering, but because of the way our brain is developed, right? We can do feminine and masculine at the same time. I used to hate, are you a girl? No, I'm a man.
Well, lesbians are always asked who's the man and who's the woman. And that's such a stupid question.
Right. But I'll tell you, I hated the Catholic Church for a period. I felt like I was in, that movie Alien, where this thing bursts out of the chest of. I thought I was when I started leaving the church, I thought this thing was going to come out at me, because I thought, what are you doing? What are you doing? But the book Siddhartha that Herman Hesse wrote, and Siddhartha went off to find out what is truth, right? And he had to have the experience. He met this holy man that his best friend decided to follow. And the guys, the Buddha said to him, why aren't you going to follow me? He said, because I have to have the experience. Well, you and I had to have the experience before it was true for us, right? So, yes, I left the Catholic Church. I hated Benedict, Pope Benedict. I mean, he was just the devil incarnate. I called him a German shepherd rather than a good shepherd. He was terrible, and there are terrible people in the Catholic Church, capital C. But there are also wonderful people, who just are an incredible manifestation of the teachings of Jesus, so much so that they themselves are sons and daughters of God. See, I don't believe Jesus was the only son of God. I believe you and I.
My old pastor at the UCC church would always say, I'm a daughter of God, just the way Jesus was the son of God, capital, small s, that I don't believe that. I agree with you, Brian. I don't believe Jesus is the only, I just don't believe that. And you'll find this really interesting. I don't believe that Jesus died for our sins. I know that you might be heresy to you.
No, it's not. Jesus said, let this cup pass from me. I don't want to get crucified.
Right.
It's just silly storytelling.
Well, so for me, this is my ordination paper. I wrote my ordination paper saying that I believe Jesus came to teach us to be born, to live, to die, and to have rebirth. And the purpose of human life is to have rebirth, resurrection. We are supposed to grow and change and have rebirth over and over and over again. And that's why Jesus was here. I'm a grief counselor. I also look at what happened after he died, and his apostles were grieving. Like, it didn't turn out like they thought it was going to. And so, when somebody dies, how we make up these stories about them, and sometimes they become larger than life figures, much larger in life than they were.
Yeah.
I think that his followers were grieving, and they had to figure out a reason why this all happened. Human beings make reason, and I got ordained on that paper.
Yeah. And Anne Marie, I want you to know, I ordained myself. I for the longest time wanted to be a priest, and I finally said to myself, you are a priest. You preach, you heal, you sit with the sick. Everything that comes out of your mouth, you hope is inspired by the teachings of the holy people who have walked the earth. I don't think Jesus was born to do something. I think he discovered like you and me, he discovered what his role was supposed to be, and that was to manifest the higher power. You and I give the world a little peek at the universe or God or whatever you want to call it, and we do it differently because we have different, right? I mean, all of us, and it's not just you and me. Everybody in the face of the earth can, if they choose to, reveal God to us in a way we hadn't seen before. But you have to want to do it.
So the majority of my listeners are people coming out later in life. 80% of them come from some sort of religious tradition. I've had lots of Orthodox Jewish women who I've worked with and stuff like that. What would you tell those people, especially the ones that are, really like right before I talked to somebody who was an evangelical woman who might join my program. Her husband was a pastor. She's sort of terrified about everything. What would you say as someone who's been walking this path for a while, and also somebody that like most of the people that come out later in life talk about a missing piece, like there's something wrong and they can't figure out what's wrong, and that's me. My book is called Authentic Peace because it's a play on the word of peace, Piece, because I was missing a piece, and that's one of the reasons why I've done so much with my life, because I kept searching for the peace, right? And so that's why I went back to school. That's why I've done this, and this. what would you say to the people that are just beginning in this journey, or, you know, a year or two in, and they're like, I don't know if I can do this?
Well, this is what I would say, as I said to people back in 1974, surround yourself with people who affirm you as you are. Do not spend time with people who vex your spirit. Avoid them, right? Read things by people, go to films that affirm you, listen to music that affirms you. You have been fed poison for most of your life, and you've got to regurgitate it, get it out of you, and know that once all of this black energy is out of you, you're still a Jewish woman who loves God and does not need to no longer go to Seder or Passover. You know, we don't need to leave behind ourselves when we affirm ourselves as lesbian, gay. We are gifts from God to the world. You know, people would say, you know, I was asked to write this article. And this is for them too, Anne Marie. I was asked to write the article, are gay people part of God's plan? You know, that's a big question. Am I a mistake that needs to be tolerated, or am I part of the plan? And if I'm part of the plan, you better listen up, right? Because God wants to communicate to you through me things that you can't communicate to me, right? So listen up. So I wrote that when I die, I imagine God's going to say to me, Brian, did you sing the song I taught you? Right? Now, when I say that, Anne Marie, people, everybody in the audience, which usually weren't gay, I mean, most of my audiences were straight, sat up, because they also have a song and they've got to figure out what it is and sing it. You know, and I said, God, I didn't. In the beginning, I was so afraid. I sang, I am Brian, I am straight, you know? And then when I turned 26 and I drank the turpentine, I sang, I am Brian, I am gay, won't you accept me today? And you know, when I would go on the stage with these college students, what I hoped for, and I discovered this in writing my memoir, I hoped they'd accept me. And then I got to the point, Anne Marie, where I wasn't looking for acceptance anymore. I accepted myself, so I didn't need their acceptance. So so my song today is, I am Brian, I'm gay, I'm God's gift to you today, right? I'm a gift. All these people who are asking you for guidance, they need to embrace the fact they are a gift, just the way they are, right? But they should avoid the rabbi or the priest or the nun or whoever is telling them anything different, because that person is mistaken. They don't know God, right? If they knew God, they wouldn't say what they're saying.
That is beautiful. And I end the show all the time with, first of all, I'm going to end the show with that, but I also end the show with 3 questions. And so, Brian, did you have a coming out song?
Yes, my coming out song was I Am, I Said. I mean, if I saw that on your questionnaire and I thought, okay, what was your coming out song? Oh, there were tons of songs, Anne Marie. You know, one was We Kiss in the Shadows, you know, from South Pacific. You know, that was a song. And of course, then the big song is I Am What I Am. I mean, pardon? What's that?
I said South Pacific is the gayest musical ever. I just was actually, my wife does not know musicals. I have a gay man inside of me dying to get out because I'm a huge musical theater fan. And so so we listened to soundtracks together because she's never listened to them. And so we listened to South Pacific the other day and I'm like, this is so gay.
It is. And of course, the song for people, I think, I don't know if this was true for you, but in Boston, when I was in my 20s or early 30s, La Cage aux Folles came to the theater. And when he sang, I am what I am, and what I am needs no excuses, people were crying, you know, throughout the theater and standing and cheering, because this is before we had any public support. You know, I am what I am, and what I am needs no excuses. And so I would say that was my coming out, you know, the big one. But the one it's no different when, Neil Diamond is singing, I am, no, what was it? What did he say? I am who I am, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So anyway,
I am,
I said, thank you, which is
yeah,
what God said, which is what
well,
God said
to Moses in the
yeah,
burning bush.
yeah.
And it said Moses asked who God was, and God says, I am the great I am. And
I am who I am. Yeah.
I am.
I
And
am.
it's so funny because I have found great comfort in the I am statement as well. I want to do it. I've never done a tattoo, and I always wanted to do be still and know I'm God. And so, but I don't really want to have a Bible verse on me for some reason. So I
Yeah.
just want to be still and know, because people
Yeah.
don't know, because it's really in the stillness is when we get to know the divine. It is in the stillness.
I love the quote, love God and do what you will. Because, if you love God, what you're going to do is going to be something that is loving kindness. This whole thing is about loving kindness. Jesus was about loving kindness. Buddha was about loving kindness. Gandhi was about loving kindness, right? None of them said take up the sword. None of them. Okay.
Absolutely.
You had two more questions?
Yeah, I know you have to go. So my next question is a book or a movie that really changed your life, just blew your mind.
Well, when I was in the monastery for a short period of time, and I snuck out. I was supposed to be going to classes, summer school, and I went to the movie Juliet of the Spirits. That was Federico Fellini, and it was about this housewife whose husband was cheating on her, and she lived next door to a pleasure palace, and she wanted to go into it so much, but she was so afraid, and that was me. I'll tell you, I had to see a therapist before I went in the monastery. That was part of the rules. And I told him, I think I'm bisexual. Yeah, that's what we all say in the beginning, And he said, Brian, you've had the sexual experiences of a 12-year-old. I wouldn't worry about it. And that was true. That was true. This little Catholic boy had no sexual experiences, and that frustrated the hell out of my girlfriends. I'd take them to the door and kiss them goodnight, but that was it. And
that was it.
And their friends were comparing notes. Did he go to third? No, Brian stays on first.
How would you describe your life today, Brian?
My life? Oh, I'm very joyful. That doesn't mean there aren't bumps in the road, but Ray and I, 48 years together, 50 years doing healing work as an openly gay, celebratory person of faith. I'm a person of faith, right? If I don't want to say Christian, because even though Jesus is part of my menagerie of spiritual teachers,
yes,
I don't want anyone to think that I'm not them too. So I'm this wonderful potpourri, and I love it. And I love knowing that I've been used by God, and I love having a relationship with God. What takes my breath away? The color of flowers. I live in Florida, and the bougainvillea, all different colors. And Anne-Marie, I stop and I gasp, and I realize there is God. And I say, I talk to the flowers. I say, you are so beautiful today. My goodness, aren't you beautiful? Right? Because the flower is doing exactly what it's supposed to do, right? It's blooming and it's beautiful. And that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to bloom, right? And be beautiful.
So, Brian, you've succeeded. So thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was wonderful to have you. Thank you for all the work you've done with the queer community for the last 50 years of your life. Thank you for people like you. You are now become an LGBTQ elder, and I'm just awed by you. And it's been
Thank you. And thank you for coming out, for going to seminary at that age, and for doing what you're doing, because the Holy Spirit And I talk about the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is guiding you, Anne-Marie.
Well, I'm a perpetual late bloomer, Brian.
You've been listening to Coming Out and Beyond, LGBTQIA plus stories with Anne-Marie Zanzal. New episodes of the Coming Out and Beyond podcast drop every other Friday. You can tune in at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and at annemariezanzal.com. Be sure to hit subscribe when tuning in so you never miss an episode. And for more resources, articles, videos, and a free downloadable guide for coming out later in life, visit annemariezanzal.com.